month are we in? October. We are excited today to have Leslie Creel with us. But before we get going, just wanted to give you a little bit of information about Academic Alliance. Our mission and vision are on the screen here. We just like to remind people that we want to promote the implementation of evidence-based practices in the areas of reading, writing, and math for students with disabilities. But a lot of the information we share, we do want to remind you, can be used with any students. Our team consists of myself, Deanna Pierce is the program director, Dr. Mitchell is our senior advisor, Jenny Saunders is our program coordinator, and Dr. Susan Thomas is our facilitative coach. So I will stop talking here and turn it over to Leslie, who's got great information to share with you today about task difficulty, sequencing, and choice. Leslie, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to talk about the subjects today with you guys. I'm an instructional specialist with the Berkeley County School District Office of Special Services. And as a former ED teacher, these are a lot of the practices that I lived and breathed when I was in the classroom. And I found that they were very helpful for me in helping to influence my students' behaviors. So just a little bit about why these topics are important. For some students who can do the task, but then choose not to do the task, this can be a way to motivate them and get them into those more compliant behaviors. Research has also shown that students are more likely to complete tasks when they perceive them to be achievable. I know for myself, if I know that I can do something, I'm a lot more likely to continue working on it than if I have the belief that I can't do it. And then we all know students are more compliant when given choices about tasks and assignments. All children like choices. We as adults like choices. And a lot of these depend on a knowledge of the student. So knowing your student is very important, knowing what their reinforcers are, what their skill level might be, and what preferred activities they enjoy. We also have to be willing to give up some of our control and let students have control when it comes to working on tasks and helping, our students to be successful. So the first section I want to talk about is what is task difficulty. And task difficulty relates to work assignments that might exceed the student's skill level. These are those assignments that when we're presenting new knowledge to students that we're wanting them to practice and work on. And if the student perceives the task as too difficult or too hard, you're going to see those non-compliant behaviors and anxiety feelings increase in students. So just some thoughts on how to do this. Time adjustments. Have shorter work periods with other fun tasks in between. I've seen teachers set a timer for a student where they work for X amount of minutes and then they have an X amount of minutes break. Say they work for 10 minutes, have a 2-minute break. Then they come back and work for another period of time for another break. And that kind of helps. It gives the students a way to break up the task and assignment, and it gives them a chance to look forward to, oh, I get to jump on the trampoline or color for 2 minutes. They know, and so that helps them work longer on tasks. Also, length adjustments. What I've done for my students in the past, if I've had a page of math worksheets or math problems that they're supposed to do, I would highlight or circle 4 or 5 problems, have them do those. Then I'd look over them. And if the students were getting them correct, then I was like, very good, let's move on. You can also cover the tasks with a piece of paper or fold the paper just to show them only the part they're working on. You can highlight and underline important words and instructions, guided notes. I used guided notes a lot in my classroom. If I knew we were working on, particularly in science and social studies, I would have the guided notes that I would give them and then just have them either circle the missing word or fill it in. You can also change the response mode. If a student does not do well with writing, have them dictate it to you. We used to do, when we would do our writing lessons, if the student I knew really struggled with handwriting, if handwriting was difficult for them, then I would say, well, you tell it to me and I'll write it. You can also, for your older students, to use outlining software, or even make a video or draw a picture to illustrate what their answer would be. And then you want to use the same sort of strategies you used when you first presented the material. You want to practice with them, give them a little bit of time to work on an assignment, and then assess them very quickly. And if they're making progress with it, then continue to move on. But you can also use that to see if you need to go back and re-teach that section of the lesson. For activity sequencing, we
Leslie,
talk about,
can I ask you a quick question there?
yes.
Those are such great ideas. I love Deanna said that. They're simple and easy to implement. And these are things that can be implemented with students in general education classrooms very easily, because it's not just our students with disabilities that, have trouble. And I think that's important for us to remember that sometimes, we can share these ideas with our general classroom teachers for all students when they're having trouble getting started or do that shutdown of doing the work. And so have you seen those used in general education classrooms?
I have. And when I would have my students push out to their general education classrooms, I would make sure that I went up there and talked with their general ed teacher and modeled for them what these looked like so that they could use them with my students. And then I was able to see them transfer that into then using that with other students in their classroom that, did not have special education services.
And I think that's a great point. And I think sometimes another thing we can do really that builds that behavioral momentum with task difficulty is giving them something that's they can be super successful with. That there's some curriculums that have that built into the independent work. Is that the things that they start with are very easy, that they can be successful, and that gets them going. So there's so many great ways to do that. I appreciate you sharing those different things.
And I'm actually glad you brought up behavior momentum because I was going to talk about that later. But people don't realize the power of behavior momentum. And then once the student feels successful and they're able, then they'll be a lot more willing to do harder tasks. And by doing that, you build their stamina for completing longer and longer tasks. I found that my students, once they knew that I was going to be there to help them and support them, and they were starting to feel successful, that they were infinitely more willing to complete harder tasks for me. I would say, like, I'll do some and you do some, or let's do a race to see who can do 5 problems the first. So I think that, if you make it a game, kids love games, and we did some of our best learning through gameplay. In activity sequencing, so this is what's known as task interspersal. And it's just a simple strategy of putting tasks that are easy to do with new or more challenging materials. So maybe you have, I always use math as my default example, but say you're doing multi-digit addition. Well, maybe you have 3 multi-digit addition problems, but then boom, you throw in that easy 2-digit addition that the students can do. And then a couple more of your multi-digit addition, 2, 3 or more digits, and then you throw in another easy problem that they know how to do. So you intersperse those difficult tasks with tasks that they've already mastered. You can shorten the length of time. We talked about that, using the timer to show how long they have to work on a task. Or shorten the amount of work. Maybe, if, like I said before, if you have a page of 40 problems, do we really need to have the student do all 40 problems to know if they know how to complete the material? They can show us that in 5 problems. So we can shorten the task. Another one is chunking the assignment. For really big, overwhelming tasks for students, particularly say if you're reading a long reading passage, maybe you break it into sections and you do 1 or 2 paragraphs, do some assessment questions that they talk about with you, and then move on to the next section of the task. And one thing that I've really seen in several different classrooms in gen ed and special ed is, say you have an assessment and you have questions on there. You have your must do questions, and then you have your can do questions. And I've seen this more in the middle and high school levels. So they have an assignment, and then there are must do questions on there, and then there are some can do questions. So that also kind of gives the students the ability to do some of the activities that they really like. And maybe if there's one they don't particularly care for, they can just not do that one. And then student choice. And I don't think we realize how powerful student choice is for our students. Not only, like you said, with disabilities, but our general education students. In my years of working with students with emotional and behavioral needs, they always want to be in control. They want to be able to be the one to say what we're going to do. And I had to give up a little bit of my control to let
We
them
just got
have
done with
some
TLTs
control.
and I'm on another meeting on Zoom. It never stops. Yeah, I've got a PD meeting.
So what I use with student choice is there are many ways you can give students choice within your classroom. You can have students choose where they're going to complete their work. Maybe they want to complete their work at the kidney table, or maybe they want to complete their work on the beanbag. I had a student who wanted to complete his work under my desk, and I was fine with that because my ultimate goal was to have them finish the task, activity, work. I didn't care where they did it as long as they completed it. I had students who maybe necessarily didn't want to use pencils to write, and they wanted to use crayons, markers, or colored pencils, you know, giving them those choices. Sometimes it's whom they want to work with. I had students who would rather work with my paraprofessional or sit over by her, or they'd rather work with me. And if I wasn't working with another group of students, then I was more than happy to have them come sit at my desk next to me so they could complete their work. And then what I found had the greatest power for them is what they're going to do when they finish a task. So I had to know my students and know what they would like to do when they finish up with the task. That was a big reinforcer for them, that they knew that when they finished their task, they could either color or do a sensory activity, you know, at the table. A lot of my students like to get up and move around while they worked, and that was fine too. So just giving them choices in the way that they complete the work will do a lot for motivation and students not being resistant to doing work. There's many different ways, but it required me to give up a little bit of my control and let them have some choice and some say within the classroom. And you can also have them choose the order of tasks. What I've seen a lot done lately is task boxes. So there are those clear plastic drawers that are labeled 1, 2, 3. There are 3 assignments the student must complete, and it doesn't matter what order they complete them in. They could choose to start with drawer number 3, finish that, and then move to drawer number 1 or drawer number 2. They didn't have to complete them in the exact order. Also giving, if you know a student is having a particularly difficult day, if they've come into your classroom and maybe their morning hasn't gone the way that they wanted it to, having them some choice with what they start with can really kind of help de-escalate their behavior for the day and not increase the behavior. I found that to be true with some of my students. If I know that the bus ride was particularly difficult for them coming in, I would give them the opportunity to do, if I knew that math was more preferred than reading, I said, oh, let's start with math today, and gave them some math problems just to kind of get that momentum going for them to have a positive day. Then that's what we're talking with, behavior momentum. So we want our students to feel successful. And when our students know that we care about them and we want them to exceed, this gives them that desire to persevere on. I have found that just my relationship with my students and them knowing that I'm there for them and helping them to succeed, it gives them the motivation to keep on going, keep on doing those difficult tasks. even if it was a task that they didn't particularly enjoy, I would say, hey, let's get this done. You and I'll do this, we'll finish, and then we'll move on. We'll play Uno, or we'll play another game, or we'll go outside or take a walk. And that really helped them kind of reframe their mindset and think about that. Yes, I want to finish. I want to do what Miss Creel wants me to do. I want to finish this. Some other accommodations, one that I found is really good for helping with this is priming, letting them know that an activity is coming to an end. I can give them a timer and say, okay, we only have 3 more minutes to do this, and then we're going to move on to something that they enjoy more. And I think that really has helped a lot of my students. And I know I talked really, really fast. So if you have questions or comments or things that, anything that you guys see out in the field that you want to share.
I would love to hear from people about how they use these three. I think we all would, sharing ideas of some things that you've done with students to really, in these 3 areas, these 3 strategies that are really easy to implement, but you have to plan. And I loved what you said, Leslie, about sometimes we have to give up our adult control, which, may be hard sometimes. Never for me, but maybe for some other people. So I'm just wondering, I'd love to hear from you. Unmute or put in the chat box, join us and talk about some things that you've found successful. We want this to be a time to help each other. Chauncey, thanks. Talking about behavioral momentum with choices being your close second.
And I really love that, because I think so often as teachers, we kind of come out that everybody has to sit in their desk, everybody has to be looking at the front, everybody has to be doing the same sort of thing. And I had plenty of times that I had students who were not looking at me at all. They were looking, I don't know, somewhere in the ceiling. Maybe they were counting the dots on the ceiling. But when it came time to show me what they knew, they were paying attention. They just weren't doing it in the traditional way we would think of, as they're sitting and looking at me and looking at their eyes on me.
I was thinking about even in high school with students that are spending most of their day in general education. I was thinking about the choice, so important. We have somebody now talking about choice, which is great. But one of the things we try to work on is getting them to, be able to complete tasks and set their own goals and, activities, things they need to do to accomplish a goal. And I think you can use this to teach those skills that we know they're going to need for the workplace. Of, here are the little things I have to get done. Let me put this, on my computer, on my list of things to do. And I can kind of choose the order. So there are a lot of ways to use this with all of our students. I like Jamie Lynn, thanks for sharing alternative seating. That's a great one.
Yeah, people, that's one that's come around so recently. Let students sit on wiggle seats or bean bags. I was in a high school ED classroom, and she had really nice couches that the kids could kind of sit on to complete their work.
I have like the saucer chairs as well, and my students really like to pull those chairs to the desks and sit in those chairs while they're doing their work as well. It's just a really good motivational tool too, because if they're not doing their work, then I make them get out those chairs, stand up at the desks, or, just things like that. I make sure that they know that they have those options, but they have to also be, they have to have those rewards as well. So in order for you to be able to sit in those chairs, let's make sure that we're getting our work done. Let's make sure we're doing what we're supposed to do, things like that.
And Ms. Ayer, you bring up a good point. It may look like like it doesn't have a purpose, but you've got to set those boundaries and those expectations for, okay, if you want to sit in the saucer chair, you've got to have your work done. And having that routine already established, I think, makes all the difference in the world. And Heather, I saw your comment. I used to feel like my room was chaos too, because like you said, we had 4 or 5 different things going on, but we were working and it was loud and it was fantastic and I loved it. So I'm glad I wasn't the only one with a room that felt like chaos.
And I think having
Oh,
different seating options is great. Was in a school where some of the desks were normal, some were standing desks, some we had the chairs with the slant as well. And it's interesting how students picked where they were most comfortable. We let them choose. And I think that's an important thing to remember. Doesn't have to all be the same. I love the ideas I'm hearing.
yeah, I love clipboards too, Heather. I used to use clipboards all the time. I mean, that was great. Sometimes when the weather was really nice, we put our work on clipboards and sit outside, and that just made them very happy, and it made me very happy. These are all wonderful ideas and such great suggestions.
Leslie, can I ask you a question about when you're giving choices like seating or clipboards, those types of choices, did you take time maybe at the beginning of each semester to go over your expectations for, that the wiggle seat is not to be launched across the room or that we don't use the clipboard to smack our friend on the head? Like, did you have to take time to teach those expectations ahead of time?
We did. We would set those expectations up at the beginning of the year. And then when students, and particularly for the first few months of school, when students would use that, I'd just give them a quick reminder. I'd say, now listen, remember, when you're sitting in the wiggle chair, you've got to be seated, you're not standing on it. Or, just a quick reminder on what my classroom expectations were. Because I just don't assume that they always remember them, because they may not. And it serves as just a quick reminder to kind of let them be, a quick rule reminder so that they are aware of them. And it's not a big deal. It's just like, remember, when we use the clipboard, we keep it in our lap. So yes, we do set those expectations first and then remind them about it. And then if a student was not using it appropriately, instead of calling them out in front of the class, I would typically go over and say, talk to them quietly, like one-on-one. Chauncey, I love interest inventories too. Miss Pinkston, I'm reading your question now. I used to hear this a lot from teachers. They'd be like, well, I can't let so-and-so do this because everybody's going to want to do this. And what I have found is the other kids know that Kenny or that Jim is not on task. So they're going to know that, okay, Jim may need something different. And we would have those conversations in our class that everybody is different and that just because fair does not mean that everybody gets the same thing. Fair means everybody gets what they need. And, I would talk with them. I'd be like, well, this is what Jim needs. And for the students who are displaying the correct behaviors, I would make sure I would overly praise them, give them that positive reinforcement in order to help maybe some of those who aren't on task kind of jump in line. We used to do something in our school called bark bones. And when you would see one kid in line who was not doing what he was supposed to do, but you did see the person who was, and you would be like, oh my gosh, so-and-so's doing so great. Here's a bark bone. Everybody else would straighten up. So, did that answer your question? I'm hoping that it did. Great. Awesome.
Any other questions or comments or something you want to share that you found effective? We've got some nice, great ideas in the chat. Thank you. Chauncey, do you have a place that you have your interest inventories? Do you have a form that you use that you would share with our group?
I would have to look, but there's a couple different ones, like if they need like forced choice versus, more open-ended and stuff, depending on the student that you're working with. There's also some really awesome picture ones. When I worked in a moderate setting, I do it with the parents too, because, they know the students best. We do it in school with the students, but then the parents were usually often able to give us some additional information that the students didn't. So I would have to look for them. I have them in various places, but
And
Well,
Chauncey, that's great that you mentioned that. I never thought about you getting the parents involved in doing the interest inventories, especially for our moderate severe classrooms. I'd love to see your examples of the picture inventories because I've had several, I don't know what grade level you work with, but I've had several kindergarten through second graders, teachers reach out about interest inventories to find
okay.
out what do the students like.
Yeah,
and
I will
what
work on finding those and getting those together.
I
perfect.
would
And we can
appreciate
stick
that.
them in. What we will do is we will stick them in the materials folder. And that link is in the chat for the materials folder. It'll also be linked on our website. And so what we do is add things as we find great tools, we add them on our website. So that will be helpful.
Heather,
Um,
I've seen that picture myself and I love it. I think it's great. It's a very visual representation of, everyone gets what they need.
If we don't have any more questions, certainly keep on putting in the chat a couple of things. We have a quick feedback that we'd like for you to give you. Take a few minutes and complete this. When you complete it, you will be emailed a certificate for certificate renewal. If you would just take a moment, we want to hear, there's a question there. If there are other topics you would like for us to cover, we want to do that. And then Leslie, I'll let you advance those slides and we'll do a little reminder of some things with our Academic Alliance. We do have a newsletter and we put it out once a month. And we promise not to email you more than that with the newsletter. And also we are on social media. And you can follow us on Twitter. You can follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, and we also have a YouTube channel. And so these are all places where you can get information and follow us. And we do want to hear from you, share ideas. That's really important to us. So take a few minutes to fill out the feedback. And we will also send the link to the folder to you as well so that you know where it is, or the link to the website. Anything else?
I just wanted to remind everyone with all our evidence-based practice network webinars, there is a complimentary one-pager that explains the topic that will be in your materials folder. So if there was something that you learned today and want to share with someone else, please access that and share it. The purpose is, so it's a simple description of the practice, quick little implementation tips. If you're working with a general education teacher, supporting students with disabilities in an inclusive environment, these are all really good strategies that are easy to implement and not overwhelming for anyone. So please take a look at that. We have a library on our website of any of the evidence-based practices that we've presented so far through our network, and we have the videos there as well. So please remember to check that out and share.
Valerie, she just linked the folder, the materials folder there in the chat box.
Thanks again for joining us today, everyone. Have a great afternoon.